Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at the DJI OM4. This is a gimbal that works with most smartphones, and the reason why you might want something like this is because you can take very steady video even when you are handheld. It delivers a much smoother image, and you can often do some really cool cinematic stuff once you get the hang of how it works. And we're going to be taking a closer look at this one in just a second and why I purchased it. But I did want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that I paid for this with my own funds. All of the opinions you're about to hear are my own. No one is paying for this review, nor has anyone reviewed or approved what you're about to see before it was uploaded. So let's get into it now and see what this product is all about. Now, the price point on this one is $149. It works with just about any smartphone out there running iOS or Android. And although they have their own app for shooting things, you can also use just about any other application that you like to shoot photos or video with. You just won't get some of the more advanced software features we'll be taking a look at in a minute. But things like the joystick control here to move things around and all of the stabilization will work no matter what app you're using. So that was one reason why I was attracted to this product. The other was the fact that I don't have to balance it every time I put a new phone in, and I can very easily swap phones in and out. So it automatically balances and finds the center point for the phone that you put in, and then when you want to swap them out, let me just turn it off here real quick, you can simply just pull it off of its magnet here, and then on the back of my phone I have this little magnet that I've clamped on, which comes with it. You just take this off and then grab your other phone and attach it to that and go back out in the field. So it's very quick and easy, and again, no calibration or weights to put on. It just seems like a much easier process than some of the other gimbals that I've been playing with over the years, and that was part of the reason why I wanted to go after this one. Now, I found the clamp here should fit most phones fairly securely, although you might have some issues depending on the size of your case. So for example, my iPhone 11 Pro here works fine once I get the clamp installed and pushed down a bit, but sometimes if I don't put it in securely enough, the clamp sometimes pops the phone out, and one time it kind of shot out at me. So I think some cases might be a little more problematic than others. And the reason why it is a little tougher on cases is because they have kind of this curved design to it, and it makes a lot of sense when you have a caseless phone like this little Pixel 4a here. Full disclosure, Google sent this to the channel free of charge a little while back. And what happens here, and I'll try to get you a better view of it, is that the volume switch, as you can see, is not touching the side of the clamp here that secures it in place. So the volume rocker is right underneath this curved metal piece here, so you don't get a lot of inadvertent touches on the volume rocker or the power button for that matter, and that's why they chose this design. So it works really well on a caseless phone, but it may have a little bit more trouble on a phone with a case. Although I've got a Pixel 4 XL here, which is my largest phone, which by the way also came in free of charge from Google a little while back, that one fits better. So it's really going to vary based on the case design, and I would imagine a case that has more of a curvature around the sides versus something more flat like the case I have on my iPhone will fit a little bit better. What was really impressive to me, though, was just how securely this thing attaches to the gimbal. So you have a little dot here at the top of the clamp, and then there's another dot here on the gimbal that you align it to. And once you get it into place here, listen to how securely this secures itself. It's like just sticks right on there. And it takes a lot of force to get it off. It's a really strong magnet. So I think once you get that clamp in place, it's really going to hold on tightly. Now there's another option if you don't want to use the clamp. If you want something that's more stable, they have a little magnet that you can stick to the back of your phone or case, and that might work better for something like my phone case here that's thicker. They give you a template to get it exactly centered, and then you stick it on. But once it's stuck on, you can't use the tape that is on the back of it again. You have to replace that tape. So this might be something you may want to buy more of. And as a bonus, they have a little ring here that you can use to hold on to the phone more tightly when you're not using the gimbal. So there are some varying mounting options here, but I plan to use the clamp just given the fact that I have a lot of different phones that I want to attach to it. Now, like most DJI products, it's very well constructed and designed, and you can fold it up for transport. and that's been pretty nice as well. So what you can do here is get it just kind of locked into place like so, and it will kind of hold itself together there. And you have a little pouch that comes in the box for transport, and of course they have other cases that you can buy for it as well. When you're ready to go again, you just unfold it, get your phone attached, and turn it back on, and you're off and running again. It charges via USB Type-C over here on the right-hand side. The battery does not appear to be removable though, so you will want to probably keep some power sources with you when you're out in the field. You could charge it off a USB battery pack, for example, or just plug it in. Now, DJI says you get about 15 hours of usage with this, provided your phone is well balanced. Although I think if you're really working the motors, you'll probably see less battery life than that. But my experience so far has been pretty close to what they've been saying, so I'm pretty pleased with that. Haven't seen much of a reduction in battery life even after using it pretty extensively over the last 2 days here, so that's been good. You also have a USB port here, which they say you can use to charge the phone that's attached to it. That, of course, will reduce your overall battery life, but if you find that your phone's battery is starting to drain, plug it in, and then you can get some juice going to the phone so that you can keep on going. And then, of course, you could attach a USB battery or something to it while you're in production to keep things flowing. Now, I reattached my phone to the gimbal here so we can look at some of the controls on it. You've got a little joystick here that will adjust the pan and tilt of the camera, and you can adjust the speed of the motor inside of the app. We'll take a look at that in a few minutes. Likewise, if you want a more graceful movement, you can just turn your wrist and the gimbal will very slowly and gracefully put the camera in the position that your wrist is pointed at. And again, you can control how all of this behavior works inside of the app. So if you don't like what it's doing, you have some options to turn it off. You have the M button here, which is your power button. If you push it once, it'll switch between photo and video modes. And if you push it twice, it will adjust your camera's position from landscape back to portrait here. That's pretty neat. It's very quiet too. The motor on this doesn't make a lot of noise so long as you're balanced and centered there, so that's pretty helpful. And then to turn it off, you just push it down and hold it there, and that will shut everything down. The record button here with the big red dot in the middle is pretty self-explanatory. Push it once to record, push it again to stop. If you're in photo mode, that will take a picture. You have a battery indicator here, so you know how much juice you've got left in it before you have to charge it back up again. On the side here is a zoom control. And on my iPhone here, this will switch between lenses. So if I just push it down quickly, it'll jump between the wide angle, the standard length here, and the zoom lens. If you're recording video, its behavior will vary based on the resolution that you're at. So when you're shooting 4K video, it won't switch between lenses on the iPhone. It'll just do these digital zooms. And if you go beyond 2x, it will also just do digital zooming. And if your phone only has a single camera, everything is going to be a digital zoom. So this is not going to be as useful because once you go in beyond the standard optical magnification of your lens, you will get a lot of fuzzy video. So I would probably not be using this all that often, although it's pretty handy when you're getting set up to very easily switch between lenses without having to touch the screen. So that was useful, but in actual recording mode, not so much. Now on the front of the unit is a trigger, and that trigger will do different things based on how many times you push it. So right now my camera is kind of tilted up high, and if I want to recenter and reset everything, I just tap it twice here, and that will get it all back into position. And you can hit it again here and do the same thing. Another cool thing with this is that you can get something locked in and hold it there by holding down the trigger. So as you saw, as I move my wrist around here, the motor is trying to find what I am pointing the device at. But if I want to temporarily halt that behavior, I can maybe get it centered in on this picture on my wall. And now I'm holding down the trigger, and as you can see, even if I move the gimbal around here, it's keeping it locked for the most part on that focal point as best it can. So that's something you can use to temporarily disable the follow motion that we were seeing earlier. And then if I let go of the trigger and then move the camera here, as you can see, it will go back to its normal behavior. If you want to switch between the front and rear camera, you can tap the trigger 3 times and that will flip it around like so. And you can also have it enable the active tracking with the trigger as well, but there's better ways to get some of the active tracking going on it. Let's take a look at that. Now the active track system requires the DJI app to work, but when you have it enabled, it will keep a person or object centered in the frame even if you move the camera or the person or object is moving. Now there's a couple different ways to activate it. As I mentioned, you can pull the trigger here, and when you do that, it's going to try to take a guess as to what you want to stay focused on. And as you can see here, it correctly assumed that I wanted to follow this mug around, and it looks like it kind of locked on to Charlie Brown and Snoopy there. And as I move the phone, you can see the gimbal is moving here to keep it locked in place. And it seems to work pretty well when you're in a controlled environment, although I found at the moment the camera movement is not all that smooth. But it has some trouble when there's a lot of things going on in a scene. So here's an example of my daughter running around upstairs. And you can see that it gets her initially, and then it gets confused by the lamp, and then it finds her again, and then it loses track of her again. And this is a really hard problem to solve, given that there's so many different objects in the scene there. So I think for the best results, you probably want to have a good contrast between your subject and the background so that the app can really hone in on what you're trying to keep centered on the frame. Now you can also activate Active Track with a hand gesture. It will look for a face and then a hand being held up like this or a peace sign. And once it finds that gesture and you, it will start tracking you automatically. But as you can see here, the movement of the camera is very bouncy. I was really not pleased with that at all. Now granted, I was moving around very quickly. If I moved slower, it would certainly move slower as a result. But it really doesn't have a nice cinematic flow to it. And this was not with the gimbal's sport mode activated, which does move the motor quicker. This was just the standard mode here. So I think they need to do some work on smoothing out this Active Track feature. And like I said, it's having a really hard time staying locked on to people, especially indoors. So I think the utility of this feature at the moment is a bit limited. You're probably better off tracking people manually with the joystick or locking onto them and keeping them in the center point of the shot. All right, let's take a look at some stabilization examples. Here I am walking across my front porch with a brisk pace, and it's really keeping the image locked and centered, even though it is picking up some vibration from my feet as I'm walking around a bit. Not perfect, but nicer than going handheld, which is what this shot is. Same lens, off the gimbal, just holding the camera, but it's more subtle here, and the reason is that Apple and other phones that have nice stabilizers do a good job already keeping images nice and stable. So you may not see as much of a difference with the gimbal on a nicer phone versus perhaps a lower end or mid-range phone that doesn't have that level of stabilization built in. But if you look at something like this where I was chasing my daughter around, this worked really nicely. It kept her kind of centered in the shot there as we're moving around, and it just looks better than I could do handheld. But you'll notice there, if you look to the right, it was picking up a portion of the gimbal in that super wide mode. So you definitely want to make sure you get that clamp centered properly before you start recording, because it's very easy, especially with a wide angle lens, to pick up parts of the gimbal in the process. But I did notice one issue when you have the gimbal tilted all the way to its highest setting. If you go to tilt back down, you can see it makes a lot of jerky movements if you try to make that movement slowly. And that, of course, gets translated out onto the video, and it looks pretty bad as you're tilting down, of course, because this is anything but smooth. I don't know if this is a software issue or maybe some defect with mine, but once I get past the midpoint, you can see here it really smooths out and it makes a very nice tilt down. So I'm going to have to come back to this issue in the future. I did try reseating everything. I can't get that problem to go away, unfortunately. All right, let's jump through some of the app settings now. I'm not going to look at everything, but a few things that I thought stood out and were pretty handy. The first is that you can very easily switch resolutions just by tapping on that icon on the side there. So my iPhone, of course, can do 4K at 60 frames per second. I can very easily switch frame rates here or resolutions without having to jump out of the app. So on the iPhone, typically you have to go into settings to change this stuff, so it's nice to have it all right there. You have some manual exposure modes. So right now the camera's in auto mode here, but I could switch it to manual and set my ISO and my shutter speed. I did find, though, that it would vary the exposure based on what it was pointing at, as you can see here. So it's not locking exposure in yet, and that would be one thing I'd like to see, just so that there's not as much of a variation in the image when you're shooting it. I just couldn't adjust these things or lock them in on screen, and I saw some other folks who were reviewing this recently having similar issues here. So you can adjust exposure control here in auto mode, but when you're manual, it will make some exposure adjustments, which I hope they eliminate at some point in the future. Now you've got a number of controls for the gimbal motor here. So if you select follow mode, you can see right now by default, it's on follow, and that is going to have the gimbal follow pan and tilt motions that you're doing with your wrist. If you select the tilt locked feature here, that will only follow your panning movements, but not the up and down. FPV will do pan, tilt, and roll. And then Spin Shot does the same as FPV, but also allows you to control the roll axis rotation with the joystick. So there's some more creative stuff you can do with the Spin Shot mode. I've been leaving mine in follow. Sport mode will make the gimbal motor faster. So if the active track is having a hard time keeping something in frame, activating that mode will make the motors move quicker, but that will also result in jerkier movement. The zoom speed here refers to the speed of the digital zoom that you might do. Again, I'm not doing all that much with zooming, but you can adjust that speed there. Control stick is exactly what you would expect here. You can adjust the speed of the motor when you're using the joystick. I have mine set to slow right now, but you can also speed it up by going to medium or fast mode. The control stick direction right now is free, but you can have it only be horizontal and vertical so you don't get any diagonals there. You can invert your controls as well if you prefer a different direction to your joystick as you're pushing it. You can also set the M button control to switch between photo and video or go to quick menu. There's also a calibration setting here where you can recalibrate things if you feel like things are off. And then you also have a horizontal gimbal adjustment here that allows you to align the little clamp with the screen here to get the best centered position. So if you are seeing things a little bit off, you have some options for adjusting that. But I found that it works really nicely just by sticking it on. It tends to get everything balanced out really quickly and quite well, actually, surprisingly so, which I think is actually this product's best feature. Now there's some other gimmicky features on the app, like the dynamic zoom here that gives you kind of an Alfred Hitchcock-like effect. But as you can see, it's really fuzzy because it's relying on the phone's digital zoom to make it happen. So it's not going to be something that you're going to put into a production. It might go up on Instagram for something, but it's really not all that useful to me. But what is useful about this product, and the reason why I bought it, is the fact that I can just clamp on any phone, and I've got a bunch of them that I'm using on a regular basis, and I've got a nice stable shot that I can walk around with without having to get weights installed and counterbalances and all this calibration. For the most part, I stick a phone on here, turn it on, and it works. And that was what I was looking for, because I am often trying to do quick shots here that I want stabilized, and this is doing it for me. I also like the fact that I don't have to use their app either. I can use the apps that I'm already using, including the NDI app I use on my production software to bring live video in real time. So I'm really happy with it from that standpoint. I'm sure there are gimbals out there that do more and can turn further than this one can turn, for example. It doesn't go 360. But again, I was looking for something simple that works and allows me to very quickly swap phones in and out. And that is what this is doing for me, and that's why I'm fairly happy with it. I wish it was a little bit more stable when I was walking. As you saw, some of my feet were getting translated into the shot, but by and large, it seems to be doing what I wanted it to do, and I'm pretty happy with it as a result. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below, and until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Tom Albrecht, Chris Allegretta, Mike Patterson, and Bill Pomerantz. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.